Comparison is a dangerous enemy, and it is never more powerful than when it goes unnoticed and unchecked. But if we can begin to learn to recognise when we have fallen foul of comparison, we can both limit and reverse the impacts it can have. But let me start with a story. So the year is 2007, it's a summer's day, and I'm about to receive my dissertation results. 10 months of researching, drafting, redrafting, editing, all comes down to this 1 minute. And I've worked it out. All I need is 55. 55 marks, and I get a 2-1 overall in my degree. The thing I've been working towards for 3 years. So you can imagine the anxiety, the anticipation as I turn the page over. But there it is, top right-hand corner, 58. I'd done it. I'd achieved the thing I'd been working towards for 3 years, and I was starting to feel proud of myself. But now that I had my result, I was kind of eager to find out how my friend had done. Now, truth be told, I was a little bit nervous for her. Whereas I had spent 10 months refining my submission, hers had been written at 3 a.m. the morning it was due in, following a lot of crying. But as I walked up to her, I could see the relief on her face, and I knew that she too had passed. And as I asked her how she had done, I kind of expected her to let me know that she'd scraped by with a 40, 45. But no, with much joy and exuberance, she told me that she had got 63. Oh, I said. Well, actually the O was inside my head. Out of my mouth came the, wow, that's amazing, I'm so pleased for you. I told you could pull it off. But inside my head, the O signified me going from being pleased and proud of my 58 to suddenly disappointed and ashamed of it when it was compared to her 63. What minutes earlier had had me celebrating the fact I had passed my degree suddenly felt inferior and shameful when it was compared to somebody else. I wonder if you have had a similar experience, where you've gone from feeling pleased and proud of something to feeling disappointed or disillusioned with it when it's compared to somebody else. Maybe it's like me in academia, or maybe it's something else. Maybe it's your relationships, your finances, your career, your appearance, your social media profile. I think comparison is probably a lot more common than we would like to admit. In fact, I'd like to suggest that comparison is so insidious that it impacts each and every one of us on a daily basis. But if you think about it, is it really any wonder? Because in many ways, we are born into a comparative society. The very first thing that happens to us when we are born is that we are weighed and measured and put on a percentile. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. It's really important to know how much a baby weighs. But we don't stop there. We then compare first to roll over, first words, first steps. Then, as we enter school, the paradigm continues but becomes more entrenched, as everything is kind of scored and measured and compared to peers. Then, as we get older, social media takes hold, and that becomes the yardstick of comparison. Now, I'm not suggesting that any one of these agencies is independently responsible for the epidemic of comparison, but what I'm hoping to show is how entrenched and normalised this experience of comparison has become. But the difficulty with comparison is it creates the notion of good and worthy at one end, and bad and unworthy at the other. In fact, studies in neuroscience have shown that the experience of comparison activates the area in our brain that registers pain. Feeling inferior to somebody actually elicits a pain response, as well as the much more commonly associated feelings of shame. Now, for me, a lot of my life was governed by comparison. Being compared and comparing myself to the accolades of others and feeling that I never measured up. I was never good enough, smart enough, funny enough, thin enough, pretty enough, or anything else enough. And what all this comparison did was teach me that fundamentally, I was not enough. That on that good and worthy and bad and unworthy scale, I was firmly at the bad and unworthy end. But you see, that is what comparison does. It distorts our capacity to see ourselves clearly. And what often can begin with comparing performance and what I did ends up being about comparing identity and who I am. And when we get to that point, it starts to impact the reflection we see in the mirror. And every time we compare, a new crack appears in our mirror until over time, our mirrors go from looking like this to looking like this. But it is not only against each other that we compare. When working with a collection of young women who had become homeless, it wasn't the comparisons with each other that brought them the most pain. In fact, the women often found they could laugh about those things together. But the thing that brought them the most pain, the most distress, and the most shame was that when they compared themselves to an internalized sense of what they thought they should be, their idea of what they thought a successful person looked like, the adult these women had dreamed of being when they were children. That is the thing that brought them the most pain, the most shame, and the most distress, and the thing that cracked their mirrors the most. But whether it be comparison with one another, or comparison with an internalized sense of should, what we can see is that each time we compare, a new crack appears until our mirrors go from showing us a clear idea of who we are meant to be to showing nothing but a confused and distorted image. Iyanla Vanzant, an inspirational speaker, talks of comparison and says that comparison is an act of violence against the self. But I would go one step further and suggest that comparison is the first step in self-annihilation. Because when everything we are, when everything we do, and everything we aspire to be is placed on a measuring stick against other people, we lose our individuality and we rob the world of our uniqueness. Let me give you an example using some fruit. So here, I have an orange. It's quite an outstanding orange. It's round, it's bright, and I'm pretty sure if I bite into it, it's going to be rather juicy. This orange, this is at the good and worthy end of the scale. This orange, in fact, could be the epitome of everything it means to be an orange. This is an Instagrammable orange. But I have another orange. This orange is a little bit more disappointing. It's the wrong size, it's the wrong shape, it smells wrong, and I'm not convinced if I bite into it, it's going to be juicy. This banana, that's at the bad and unworthy end of the scale. In fact, this orange is a total failure as an orange. In fact, if I were this orange, I think I might start to feel quite dissatisfied with myself. Every time I got dressed in the morning, I'd put on my peel and I would realize that I am the wrong size and I am the wrong shape, and fundamentally, I am just not orange enough. I might start to feel depressed and anxious and begin withdrawing from life because I would know that at my very core, I was just a rubbish orange. But you see, when we compare, we are like this second orange. We are judging ourselves against something we were never intended to be compared with. Each one of us is unique and therefore cannot be compared with anybody else. It is almost as ludicrous as measuring the quality of a banana by how much it is like an orange. But I am here today to tell you that you are not an orange. You, my friend, are a banana. And in fact, you are actually a world-class, outstanding, phenomenal banana. Now, for me, it took me a very long time to embrace my banana-iness, my Laura-ness. Instead of being successfully Laura, I spent a long time being unsuccessfully other people. But my freedom came when I realized that I was unique and therefore couldn't be compared to anybody else. But having realized that, I then had to go about repairing my mirror. So how do you do that? How do you repair your mirror when comparison has distorted the image? Well, I would like to suggest 4 steps to you today. So the first is forgive. We need to forgive ourselves for not being somebody else. Forgiving ourselves allows us to remove ourselves from the innate sense of competition that comparison brings. We step out of the rat race and effectively say, I am a banana. I was never intended to be an orange, and therefore I make a rubbish orange. But not only that, we also need to forgive the other people who have compared us, whether they be teachers, parents, partners, leaders, or anybody else. It's only by forgiving them that we clear the way to repairing our mirrors. Secondly, we need to accept. We need to accept that our opinions might not be the most accurate measure of who we are. That the experiences we have had, the comparisons we have made and have been made of us, have warped our ability to see clearly. And it is only through accepting that neither our thoughts nor our feelings are an accurate measure of truth can we begin to see ourselves clearly again. Thirdly, we need to correct. This is when we need to go and find out the corrected version for each one of those thoughts, that we need to heal the cracks in our mirrors by finding out the truth. Now, this may be as simple as keeping your eyes on your own race and ignoring other people's. It might be about going out and actually finding some of those truths. Now, for me, comparison taught me that I was never enough. Finding out the truth taught me that I was everything I needed to be, even when I didn't feel like it. And finally, we need to teach. This is when we need to train our brains to see things in a new way. We need to use our brains to correct the inaccuracies that comparison has brought in our life. Now, neuroscience has shown us that whatever our age, our brains have a level of plasticity. Plasticity is the thing that allows us to shape and mold and change our brains over time. And a lot of very complex neuroscience can be simplified to mean that the things that you pay attention to are the things that will become biggest in your life. So if you choose to spend all of your time focusing on the fact that you are a failed orange, you will believe, and your brain will believe, and your brain will tell you that you are a failed orange. If instead you focus your mind on the fact that you are an incredible banana, that is the thing that your brain will believe. When I started this journey for myself, I began by writing down every negative thought I could identify about myself. And there were a lot. But I then followed the correct stage. I went and found out the truth for each one of those thoughts, and I repeated them to myself again and again and again and again and again. And to give you an idea of how many agains, some of those agains are still going 10 years later. But even though it may take time, that is the way that we change our brains, the way that we teach and train them to see things differently. And hopefully you will notice that as you follow those 4 steps, a new fact emerges. The fact that you are incomparable, that there is nobody else's whose reflection is like yours, nobody else who can bring your contribution to the world. So as I draw to a close, I encourage you to look again in your mirrors and to consider whether comparison has distorted the image. And if it has, to think about whether you can use a fact to repair that. Because the fact is, you are a first-class, world-changing, outstanding, phenomenal banana. But you will only ever see that if you stop seeing yourself as a failed orange. Thank you.